Welcome, this is Mr. Anderson, and this is instruction solving with the quadratic formula. This is from Chapter 4, Section 7. First thing I want to do is to write out the quadratic formula, so I need to know the quadratic formula. Let's write it out. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, we want to know what is this x? What are we trying to find here with this formula? X equals, I end up with one answer or two answers, and this is what we are finding. All right, so I may have this situation with my parabola that is generated from a quadratic function. All right, so there's an x-axis. Let's say here's a y-axis, and my quadratic may look something like that. All right, so I could have a situation where I am crossing over the x-axis in two different spots. Right? Where it crosses over the x-axis, that is this x value that I'm getting here. All right, so I could have two answers. Well, my parabola crosses over the x-axis in two spots. I could have another situation where my parabola only touches the x-axis, so it only intersects the x-axis in one spot, like that there. All right, or I could have a situation where my parabola doesn't even touch the x-axis, like that. All right, so here I would get two x answers here. Here I'd just get one x answer. So let's go on to solving. I need to know, what am I going to substitute into this formula? I need to know the a, the b, and the c. So put your quadratic into standard form, like this right here, the highest degree to the left. This number right in front of the x squared, the coefficient to the x squared is a. Here it's an understood 1, so a equals 1. B is the number in front of the x. Make sure and take that number with the sign. So the coefficient in front of the x is negative 4. That is the b value. And the c value is this last term, 3. Make sure and again take it with the sign. C equals 3. Now I want you to get used to substituting using parentheses. And remember, when we're substituting into the quadratic formula, we are replacing just the b, right? Like b equals negative 4, not negative b equals negative 4. So I'm just replacing the b. So what this is going to end up with is negative 4, which is going to make it a positive 4, and we'll simplify and all that. But make sure that you are just substituting for the b. And when you substitute using parentheses. So when you replace the b, replace it with parenthesis, negative 4, parenthesis. When you replace the c, parenthesis, 3, parenthesis. All right, so the next step is that I will rewrite this quadratic formula just with the substitutions, replacing the b's with the parenthesis, negative 4, parenthesis, and so forth. All right, so it'll look like this. X equals negative, b is negative 4, so parenthesis, negative 4, parenthesis, plus or minus the square root of b squared. So again, b is negative 4, so I'm going to put negative 4 squared minus 4. A is 1, so parenthesis, 1, parenthesis, and c is 3. All over 2 times a, which is just 1. Now, I'm ready to start simplifying this. All right, take the time to rewrite this with just the substitution. It really helps, and this simplifies really quickly. When I simplify for the next step, I'll simplify this area right here in front of the plus or minus. I'll simplify this denominator, and I'll simplify all this underneath the radical. All right, by the way, this underneath the radical is called the discriminant. And the discriminant, it can be a positive number, it could be a negative number, it could be 0. And those three situations tell us a lot about this parabola as far as where it crosses the x-axis. If this discriminant is a positive number, then my parabola will cross over the x-axis in two different spots. All right, like this right here, two different spots. All right, if this discriminant is a 0, then I'll have like this situation right here, where it's just touching the x-axis in one spot. And if this discriminant is a negative number, then my parabola doesn't touch the x-axis. What I'm going to end up with is two non-real solutions. All right, and we're going to cover that later. All right, so let's simplify here. I want to simplify this first area. Negative 4 is 4, plus or minus the square root. Now what I'll do here is I will simplify both these terms here, just right above the radical, to help me keep things straight and simplify correctly. So negative 4 times negative 4 is 16, and then minus 4 times 1 times 3 is 12. All right, so what I'll write in my next step here for the simplification is 16 minus 12 is 4. And this is going to be over 2 times 1 is 2. So my next simplification, x equals 4 plus or minus the square root of 4 is 2, of course, and over 2. Now, last step here, I'm going to break it apart into two different answers. All right, and this plus minus is what creates these two different answers. I could have 4 plus 2 and then divided by 2, or I could have 4 minus 2 and then divided by 2. So I take both those routes. So I take this northern route here, 4 plus 2, that's 6. And then divided by 2, that's going to give me an answer of 3. Or I could take the southern route here, 4 minus 2, that's 2, divided by 2 is 1. So here are my two solutions. All right, so this parabola would cross the x-axis at 3 and cross the x-axis at 1. Now let's look at one more problem. I want to write down the quadratic formula. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Make sure you're putting the quadratic formula all over 2a like the song says. I see a lot of mistakes where people just put this radical with b squared minus 4ac over 2a and not put the 2a over underneath the negative b as well. Now make sure you have it all over 2a. I need to know what the a, b, and c values are. The number in front of the x squared is understood 1 again. Number in front of the x is negative 11. And the last term, negative 3, is my c value. Make sure you want to substitute this using parentheses. Substitute using parentheses. I want to do my first simplification, or actually I want to rewrite this just replacing the letters with what they equal. All right, just the substitution of the letters. X equals negative b, so b is negative 11, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so b is negative 11 squared, minus 4 times a is 1, and c is negative 3. And this is going to be all over 2 times a, which is 1. I'm ready to do my first simplification here. So x equals, simplify this first area right here, negative 11 is going to be positive 11 plus or minus the square root of, let's see, negative 11 times negative 11, that's going to be a positive 121, minus 4 times 1 times negative 3 is negative 12. So minus a negative 12. So this is what I'm going to write underneath the square root here. 121 minus a negative 12 is plus 12, so that would be 133 all over 2 times 1 is 2. All right, now you want to make sure and simplify this fraction if you can. All right, I can't simplify 11 over 2. And you also want to simplify any radicals if you can. And I can't simplify that square root of 133 either. Just a quick reminder, though, on simplifying radicals. Let's just take square root of 12, for example. What you want to do is to look for factors that are perfect squares, things that you know the square root of, like 4, 9, 16, 25, 36, 49, 64, 81, 100, 121, 144, 169, things that you know the square root of. Well, I know that 12 is 4 times 3, and I know what the square root of 4 is. So I'm going to rewrite this as 4 times 3. That's 12. Square root of 4, I know, is 2, so I'm going to rewrite that as 2. And square root of 3 doesn't simplify anymore, so I just leave that as a square root of 3. So that's simplifying a radical. All right, this cannot be simplified. And if they don't tell you to use a decimal approximation, leave it as an exact answer. This is an exact answer right here. If I take the square root of 133, I'm going to get some sort of decimal, and now I'm only at an approximation. So just leave it like this right here. All right, and they'll usually tell you, give the exact answer using fractions and radicals as necessary. All right, so I could answer it like this, or I could answer it like this as well, separated into two different answers. X equals 11 plus the square root of 133 over 2, or x can also equal 11 minus the square root of 133 over 2. There's my two possible answers. These are both saying the same thing. Remember, this plus and minus is representing two different answers. I hope this was helpful, and I will see you in class.